Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, to the latest episode of the Blitz Network Radio. If I'm doing this right, are we on episode 35 now, technically?
Yes. Wow, you remembered.
Well, I remember that we did the Peanut Tillman episode a couple weeks ago, and then this actually leads me to how I wanted to open the episode. Robert, would you like to apologize to me for excluding me from the free agency podcast last week?
I already did apologize to you.
But would you like to do it publicly for all the world to hear?
Sure. I'm sorry that I had on a cap expert that did it well, but I love you, Adam.
Wow.
I love you.
So Brad, you're saying that I could be replaced by Brad? Okay, wow. There's nothing against Brad either. I just don't want to feel like I'm replaceable. That's all.
You're not a core prospect when it comes to the cap. So that's just enough. I'm just saying, Adam. I'm just saying.
Fair enough. All right. I accept that. I accept that. All right. Anyway, as we are recording this podcast after the initial wave of free agency and after you and Brad expertly broke down some of the Bears' moves early on in free agency in that first wave, we're kind of in this, I would almost call it holding period now with the NFL offseason, where there are still some talented free agents available. There's still some holes to fill for the Bears. So let's kind of start with that latter topic, though. Rob, when you look at some of the Bears' moves to this point in the offseason and the free agency period, what holes still stick out on this roster to you that they still need to address?
Well, I think prominently, obviously, that's the hot topic among social media anyway, is edge rusher. They don't have a third edge rusher. They arguably have one of the better edge rushing duos with Khalil Mack and Leonard Floyd, but they don't really have anyone reliable beyond that. Aaron Lynch probably isn't coming back, has already had a bunch of visits with the Seahawks and Colts, and might be getting into a bidding war there for his services. So they really need that third pass rusher. They need a guy that can spell Mack and Floyd. I mean, Floyd, while he played all 16 games last year, obviously he had that cast on for the first few months, and he's not someone that I would necessarily 100% trust to stay healthy as much as he's my boy. And obviously Mack had his occasional injuries there in the midseason. So, getting that third guy will be very, very, very important into keeping this defense from completely dropping off, because I think it's going to be very difficult for them to statistically, obviously, maintain what they did last year. One of the ways that they can kind of, keep the water from flowing in the boat is getting that good, reliable third edge rusher. And then elsewhere, I mean, cornerback, they don't really I didn't expect them to address boundary cornerback in free agency. There wasn't really that guy this year. There wasn't really that Trumaine Johnson or anything. But they don't have any depth behind Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara. And that's a problem. I'm not sure the Bears trust Kevin Tolliver at all, as much as I like his talent, and I'm sure they like his talent too, but I'm not sure they trust him and his growth. And then obviously also slot cornerback. I've been very vocal as to Buster Skrine's prowess or lack thereof. And I would anticipate the Bears drafting a nickel cornerback to be in a competition with him, because going into the season with Buster Skrine is to me a very that's a very slippery slope.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think obviously the big hole that still needs to be addressed is kicker. But I look at the addition of Mike Davis to the running back core, and it just leaves so much for me to be desired, especially when you look at some of the contracts that were signed in free agency by some of these running backs. Obviously, for a moment, there was this hope of possibly Le'Veon Bell coming, even though it seems more than anything like that was just kind of maybe agent-driven rumor stuff. But looking at a guy like Tevin Coleman signing for 2 years and a total of $10 million, when he was in some ways kind of the ideal fit for what the Bears could have added to this offense, to end up with just Mike Davis is kind of rough for me, because to me, all I think about with Mike Davis is that he's going to be your third running back, and he's basically your Taquan Mizell. So you're cutting Taquan Mizell, who was a source of much frustration for Bears fans last year, but you're replacing him with a guy who maybe fits a little better, but you still haven't addressed the main issue And I'm not going to say that Jordan Howard still being here is the main problem, but if Jordan Howard is still your number one back when the season starts, I think that's a problem, especially considering the way he was used last year. So I was hoping for a lot more at the running back position. However, that does tell me that the Bears are clearly targeting a few guys, hopefully, or at least maybe they have their eyes on one specific guy for the draft, and that I'm starting to almost expect that they would use that third-round pick on a running back that they think can be their number one guy next year.
See, I disagree on the third-round pick absolutely being like I agree with you on the concerns that Davis isn't really going to be the answer. He's your depth guy. He's your situational guy. He's your change of pace guy. He's a solid receiver. I don't think he's a superstar by any means. But I don't think they're necessarily locked into a running back in the third round. I think really addressing cornerback is important. You can never, like with pass rushers, you can never have too many cornerbacks. And right now, to me, the Bears only have two reliable guys. And Prince Mukamara is one of the most penalized cornerbacks in the NFL. And he's really just a number two. So I think right now that's something that I would keep an eye on. This isn't like a cornerback class like 2018 or 2017, but there's a lot of guys, someone like Justin Lane from Michigan State. I'm not sure how much his stock's going to go up, but that's someone that they could target. To me, that's more paramount than absolutely finding a workhorse or finding that 10 to 15 touch guy. That's just me though.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I agree with that. Now, something you said there kind of, sparked an idea in me, because I think this is being said about a lot of positions in this draft. You mentioned it about cornerback just a second ago. I've heard it said a lot about running back and wide receiver. Is this a draft to you, Rob? And I know neither one of us are really big draft experts, but in your experience, does this draft kind of seem like it lacks a great deal of star power? Obviously, there's the top names like Nick Bosa, Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver, guys like that. But after those big names, I feel like there's not a lot of guys that I look at and think that guy's a future star. But there are a bunch of guys that could even be had in the mid rounds where it's like that guy's going to contribute at the NFL level.
I'll never pretend to be a draftnik by any means. I'll never pretend to be someone that enjoys that process so much. But I know, obviously, I know what like a good player looks like. I know what to look for, and specifically in positions. Like whenever I do dive in, as I have to, in like scouting guys or whatever. This is a very, very good pass rusher draft. You mentioned all those guys, Bosa and Oliver, but just the sense I get, and the sense that whenever I have like kind of just watched a little bit of film, there's not much depth, and there's not much other guys to hang your hat on.
Right. I almost think it's like there's a lot of depth in terms of like there's guys you can get that will be contributors, but I kind of feel like after like maybe the top 5 to 6 talents, it's almost like a crapshoot where you could look at any big board and, there could be, you could see a guy ranked 6th on one big board and he's ranked 30th on someone else's. It just seems like such I wouldn't say convoluted. I think that may be the wrong word, but such a interesting draft where like last year, it seemed like some of the guys, like a lot of the guys that were, some of the top 10 talents seemed like almost locks for like all pro positions, guys like Roquan Smith and some of those quarterbacks that were there, Saquon Barkley. I'm
Baker Mayfield.
Names. Yeah, Baker Mayfield. Well, I mentioned the quarterbacks. I guess I didn't say it by name, but I'm just thinking of some of those guys. Yeah, like there was just guys there that Quentin Nelson's a really good example. Where it's just like it seemed like they were just like some of the craziest talents to come into the league. I shouldn't say craziest ever, but just like it seemed like there was a bunch of all pros. And this year it seems like there's Nick Bosa, like the guys I mentioned that seem like okay, those guys can absolutely be all pros or Pro Bowlers. And then it's like a bunch of guys. It's not a top heavy draft at all, and that makes it even more interesting for me going into this draft season.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like. I almost think from a Bears perspective that plays into their hands because that's just they don't have their first 2 picks, so they're more or less kind of playing with their hands tied behind their back, but they're kind of on an even plane with everybody. Where a lot of like if they do their scouting homework right, if Pace and his scouting department do it well, they can find a good contributor there. Maybe not a blue chip prospect. Like we're saying here, there's not really that many blue chip prospects in their mind. There's not going to be a guy that's going to be a first team all pro in his rookie season, the way Quentin Nelson was, the way guys like even what's his name?
Was Saquon Barkley a pro, an all pro?
I don't believe so. He was a Pro Bowler.
Kind of transcendent talent though, like that's going to have a huge impact like that.
Yeah, there's not really that guy, so that almost plays into the Bears' hands because they're on an even plane with everybody. And I'm not trying to rationalize. I'm not someone to rationalize it well, but you know, they do their, like I'm saying, they do their scouting work, and they can find a good player. They can find a solid contributor. They don't need a blue chip prospect by any means.
Absolutely. And obviously neither one of us are big draft experts. We leave that to Jacob Infante here at the Blitz Network. But it just seemed interesting to me, as you mentioned about the cornerback position. I thought about that with how the running backs and wide receivers, like I said, are the same way. It's just an interesting kind of draft dynamic.
Yeah, there's no generational running back in this draft. Yeah,
right.
It's just how it's normally portrayed.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, earlier you mentioned edge rusher, and obviously there's been a lot of focus in Bears, Twitter, I guess is the best kind of way to call it, and some of the Bears discussions about the Bears potentially adding, ex-Chiefs outside linebacker Justin Houston. I almost said D Ford for a second, which he's in San Francisco. I got my ex-Chiefs linebackers mixed up. But Justin Houston's who we're talking about here. And talking about Justin Houston, a lot of people are thinking that he makes a lot of sense for the Bears. The Bears even kind of teased us a little bit, tweeting out an image of Justin Houston with a link to the 15 best remaining free agents and saying, is there any Bears in here? And obviously Justin Houston was the lead image. Bears Twitter kind of had some fun with that. So you wanted to talk about Justin Houston. So I guess I'll just kind of toss it to you. What are your thoughts on this idea of Justin Houston potentially coming to the Bears, or just overall, like his free agency for him being a good player seems to be kind of quiet, and it's very interesting to me.
I think in regards to Houston being quiet, and I pointed this out a few days ago, this is a guy that was a first-team All-Pro a few years ago. Then he had an ACL surgery, and then it took him a little bit to finally get productive again and finally become a good pass rusher, albeit on a rotational minutes with or rotational snaps, that is, with the Chiefs. But he was highly compensated in this time. So he's normally someone like him, because to me he's the best available free agent in the market. I was reading like other lists earlier, and Ndamukong Suh, Jared Cook, Ziggy Ansah. To hell with that. No, Justin Houston's the best available free agent on the market. And normally guys like him would be signed right away. The Ian Rappaport in a report from a few days ago in that way validated my assessment there, because he noted that Houston's not really looking for money. He noted that Houston has kind of been already financially settled over his career, and he's patiently biding his time, evaluating all his offers. That tells me he's looking for a contender, or he's looking for a good team where he can kind of be that missing piece, or he can be more of a role player with other stars on the team. Whether that means the Bears, of course, we don't know, but they would fit that profile. But he's a perfect fit, Adam. I mean, you talk about putting a guy like Justin Houston on already one of the best pass rushers in football, where Khalil Mack is double teamed, sometimes triple teamed every play. Akeem Hicks owns the middle of the field as a dominant interior pass rusher. Sometimes he gets double teams. So that means Houston's getting one-on-ones. Justin Houston getting a one-on-one is a lot different than a guy like another third edge rusher, like Aaron Lynch getting a one-on-one. If Justin Houston's getting one-on-ones, he can get 13 or 14 sacks. He can get 20 quarterback hits just playing 60% of the snaps, just because of the guys he's playing against. I don't know if the Bears are actually going to sign him. I think that photo was purely coincidental. I don't think they were really trolling everybody as much as it was funny to see how social media reacted to that. But there's no doubting how he would fit. I think this is a guy that's finally rounded back into form, that's finally fully recovered from his knee injury. He's almost like DeMarcus Ware signing with the Broncos 4 or 5 years ago after the Cowboys, and he had some injuries there at the end of his Dallas career. DeMarcus Ware is revitalized, being more of a role player next to Von Miller, a similar talent to Khalil Mack, and on an overall loaded Broncos defense. and he had 2 Pro Bowls there, and he rounded himself back into form before eventually retiring. I really think Houston could do the same in Chicago. I think Houston more than likely is going to pick a defense where he will do that, where it'll set up perfectly for him that way. So my only question really, Adam, is like, I guess, whether the Bears want to pay him. Clay Matthews signed on Tuesday night for around $8 million of an average annual value. That to me means Houston's going to get at least $10 million, which is still a concession for him considering how good he is. Do the Bears want to pay $10 million to a third edge rusher on a 1-year deal while having only $16 million? They probably should, but a lot of that cap savings is going to be important to maintain for 2020. A lot of that cap savings is going to be important to maintain this relative 2-year Super Bowl window. So it's just something to consider. But yeah, I think Houston would be worth it in the short term if they want to take that risk.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder there. I was going to bring up Clay Matthews and just the contract he signed. And so you basically, that's what I was going to rebut with was, what about the contract? So I'll kind of go to what I was going to ask next, because this is something that I thought of the other day. And I just kind of was, as I was thinking about, like, okay, Justin Houston would be nice. And obviously, for all the reasons you just laid out, he's kind of the perfect fit. But what about bringing back Aaron Lynch, who, was here on a 1-year kind of prove it contract for about $5 million last year. A lot of it that was incentive laden. Had a decent year, was a little shortened by injury, but when he was playing, I thought he was effective, and that seems to me like a much more affordable kind of third outside edge, outside linebacker, edge rusher option. That, I mean, the defensive scheme might change a little bit with Chuck Pagano coming in, but is familiar with the players, and would bring a little bit of familiarity back. What about just keeping him around?
See, I would buy that idea. I just don't think he can stay healthy. And even at the end of last year, you saw him, breaking his arm? Was that the official injury he had against the 49ers or the Packers? It was the Packers, right? Where he broke his arm and wasn't available at the end of the season. That really, as much as like things like Eddie Jackson hurt the Bears in the playoff loss to the Eagles, and as much as things like Trey Burton maybe crippled their offensive versatility, not having a third edge rusher and allowing Khalil Mack to get owned by Lane Johnson and that great Eagles offensive line repeatedly, where they kind of just did whatever they wanted with the Bears pass rush, was also a big factor. So I don't like the idea of Lynch, because you're not sure if you're going to be able to get him in January. The Bears, Adam, aren't playing 16-game seasons anymore, or at least they shouldn't be. They're playing for 19 or 20-game seasons. They need the third edge rusher, as much as it's a situational guy, has to be available for when they get to January, for when they ideally repeat as NFC North champions and get a first-round bye. Everyone has to be available there, and I'm not sure a guy like Lynch can get to January in one piece.
Sure, I agree with that. Now, I guess as we kind of, I guess I don't necessarily agree with that. I get what you're saying though with the injury thing. To me, it just seems like the injury thing obviously is a big concern. Like you mentioned, having him around, in the playoffs is obviously going to be the most important thing. But ultimately, if the Bears are worried about the cap hit or the cap cost, to me it just seems to make a little bit of sense to maybe look for something lower cost. And obviously that, I think Aaron Lynch can kind of come in that range. Are there any other edge rushers that you think could potentially be, targets for the Bears here as that third guy?
I like Zach Brown. So he's not really a typical pass rusher by any means, and is really only transitioned to outside linebacker of late. But he's a guy that, while he's not necessarily going to pile up any quarterback hits or too much of any pressure. He's a reliable third defensive end. You can give him snaps, and he won't. I mean, he'll be healthy. That's someone you can target there. Ziggy Ansah, if you're into that, but I don't think he's particularly any good. And there's a reason the Lions haven't brought him back and aren't bringing him back. He
had 4 sacks in 7 games last year, though, which is, but he's not great, but
he's the kind of guy, like, and this isn't a knock on Floyd, like Ziggy Ansah is the kind of that does the kind of thing like Floyd does, where he'll have 1 or 2 really, really big games, just in pure numbers production wise, and then be quiet the rest of the year. And then you look at his box score at the end of the year and wow, he produced so much, he's so good, when it doesn't tell the story whole remotely. So that's kind of the deal with Ansah. But yeah, Zach Brown, definitely an option there. The thing is with the Bears, like, they might eventually be forced to circle back around to Aaron Lynch because the market isn't that great. If they're not sold on Justin Houston, they might have to just settle, which is still better than nothing.
Yeah, I think ultimately I'm kind of on board with you where I definitely want Justin Houston. I want the Bears to look at that route, but I also do understand, like you mentioned, where if Khalil Matthews actually. If Clay Matthews is getting $8 million per year, and you're Justin Houston and you're 2 years younger, on a 1 year, even 2 year deal, you're probably going to be looking for at least $9, maybe up to $10 million, at least in terms of the overall maximum value of the contract. Because I don't think, you know, that 16 million is obviously not going to be fully guaranteed to Clay Matthews. So if the Bears don't want to go that route, I understand it. But I think ultimately, you know, we talked about the kind of moves that teams that are within their championship window make in order to kind of load up to really go for it. And from some of the moves that the Bears have been making, I'm not sure if I'm convinced that Ryan Pace is really ready to stop thinking like a team that's building, you know, as much as a team that's like gearing up, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, and moves like Houston in particular, I mean, he was released by the Chiefs. So he doesn't count into the compensatory pick formula. You know, if anything, you're playing into it where there's no penalty and you can let him walk after 2019, ideally after a Super Bowl championship, and he walks straight into a nice long-term deal to close his career. You don't have to have this wholesale commitment to him. You know, it literally doesn't screw anything up. And he's the kind of guy that would stem the tide from the Bears regressing. Really, I believe that. It's not often you get to get at a guy that has 9.5 sacks and like 12 quarterback hits on 60% of his snaps. I mean, dude, he's still not fully healthy. He was still like working basically on one leg for most of 2018, and I think he finally was rounding back into form in January. You get that in Chicago. You get that where he has no pressure on him. All bets are off.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see what happens. I look at a team like the Rams, obviously, like we mentioned, adding Clay Matthews, adding guys like Eric Weddle, re-signing a guy like Dante Fowler to a 1 year deal worth $12 million.
I mean, they know they're in their window. They know,
right? Absolutely, window. and they're acting like it. And I see some of the Bears moves this offseason, and don't get me wrong, I know that they have had some cap issues, but like they cleared up Khalil Mack's money, you know, by restructuring that contract, and you know the kind of the risk and the repercussion on that is that, you know, at the end of his contract, you're shifting some of that dead money. Now, ideally, the Bears, you know, don't have to cut Khalil Mack in the next 6 years. Hopefully, you know, he'll make it through this entire career and be a very good player.
They're betting on him being able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd be silly not to, but I guess my point is just they made that move, and that's kind of the indicator that you're planning to gear up and do something big, and they haven't done it. They've made kind of small moves, retooling some things or kind of plugging some holes. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that the signing of HaHa Clinton-Dix was a very savvy move, something that could prove to be kind of like a championship move. But again, the Rams to me are a team that's gearing up for a championship, and the Bears still don't kind of fit that to me. And I guess I understand if they are comfortable with what they have and they like the idea of familiarity, but you still like. It's clear that they were missing pieces last year. And if they're thinking that their only missing pieces were the guys who were injured in their playoff game against the Eagles, I think that's a little bit of flawed thinking because you can't predict injuries. So you need to gear yourself up for every scenario.
Yeah, I almost wonder why like, you know, you have one good season, and and this isn't me like just shooting down what the Bears accomplished, but like the Packers were in complete shambles with Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers being relatively unhealthy and having one of the worst seasons of his career. There's the whole Kirk Cousins situations in the Vikings and having their typical drama. And then we don't have to elaborate too much on the mess Matt Patricia had in Detroit. Like, do the Bears think that they're direct competition? I don't think they do, but it's almost as if they're operating on this mantra where the NFC North isn't going to pick it back up. The Lions had a fantastic free agency. The Packers had a fantastic free agency. I highly doubt the Vikings are going to be.
Did the Packers really have a fantastic free agency?
I think they had a fantastic free agency. Preston Smith is very, very good.
Yeah, but Preston Smith is their only really good addition. Like, if they overpaid for Adrian Amos, and I don't think he's that good. I think if they did not like Clinton Dix, they're not going to like Adrian Amos that much. The only thing that maybe he brings is a little bit more security back there and a little more reliability, whereas Clinton Dix was a more of a playmaker and a risk taker. And it's a boomer bust kind of situation with him. But I'm not ultimately convinced that they've greatly improved their defense. And I think that there's a case to be made that a lot of Preston Smith's production in Washington was the result of playing on the other side of Ryan Kerrigan.
I guess my point is, overall, the Packers still improved. Sure. And to think that I wouldn't anticipate the Bears going 5-1 in the division again. I would see a more realistic 4-2, 3-3, and that could be the difference in a first round bye, which, if the Bears don't get a first round bye, I fail to see how they could make a Super Bowl run. Like that's not how the NFC is normally structured, and we haven't seen that kind of team make a run recent years. It's been nothing but number 1 and number 2 seeds in Super Bowl. So, they can't rest. Yeah, to your point, they can't rest on their laurels because everybody else is loading up. They are the team with the target on their back, and they can't get comfortable when everybody's gunning at you. It's time to pull out your big guns, and it's time to look inward. I mean, Matt Nagy was someone that talked about being someone that's self-scouted through all of the 2018 season and having like some of his coaches look at him and say, what was that mistake? They should be taking that same approach this offseason. And you're absolutely right. I don't think they really have yet.
Yeah, it's just tough to watch. And ultimately, I think I agree with you just about, the NFC North is not sitting still. I don't think the Vikings have gotten much better, but the Lions added good talent, like you said. The Packers, they needed to address their defense, so they did that with those players. And Adrian Amos being a reliable guy in the secondary might ultimately be a good thing for them, considering that they didn't have a lot of reliability back there. And the Packers also, don't forget, have 2 first-round picks, so no one's sitting still. And the Bears, I wouldn't say they're sitting still, but they haven't made that kind of championship signing. And I think Clinton Dix was a good move. That's a savvy signing. Buster Screen could potentially work out. I know you're not high on him, but I've seen some stuff that I think could inspire some confidence. But Justin Houston adding that kind of level of talent to kind of circle it back, that's a championship load up kind of move that I think the Bears really need to make. And even if it's not in that same kind of vein, even if it's not Justin Houston, it needs to be a number of savvy moves, and they can't just rest on their laurels and go into the draft and expect to add a ton of good players when they don't, they only have 5 picks and they don't pick till the 3rd round, and they have 2 of those 5 picks are in the 7th round. So you're not looking at a great opportunity to add a lot of talent in the draft. You have to do it in free agency and maximize the opportunity you have, even with limited cap space.
Without a doubt. I mean, their biggest thing will still be internal development. That's something we've hammered on this entire offseason. But in order for that internal development to happen, like some of those smaller, finer details, they still have to be the edges still have to be sanded over. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah. Now let's transition a little bit. You wanted to talk about this topic. It's kind of indirectly related to the Bears. So this past week, the Raiders were awarded from an analytics community they won an award from analytics community
from the official Sloan Analytics from MIT,
right?
So smartest people in the world, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they were awarded the analytics award for the transaction of the year for trading away Khalil Mack. So I'm going to read this quote that is from Rockets GM Daryl Morey, who was part of the I guess the committee, I guess, that kind of
committee, the movement.
Yeah, whatever. And this is what he says. Everyone else thought it was a terrible trade, but draft picks are very valuable. Analytics tend to fly in the face of popular convention pretty often. We don't care about what people say. That ends his quote. And then this continues. While the Raiders haven't even drafted the two players yet, Morey said the results of the picks will be assessed in a separate analysis down the road. We look at the process more than the result. Getting first-round picks can be the right thing, even if the picks aren't well executed. So,
oh, God.
Okay.
Good. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm reading that quote with you, and I just had the same reaction, the oh God moment. So I guess we can get to that last comment in a moment.
Okay.
I don't mind the Daryl Morey quote. Analytics tends to fly in the face of popular convention. I think in a lot of ways that is kind of the point of analytics.
Right.
But ultimately, the players that the Raiders drafted Raiders get with those picks are not known yet. One of them is a 24th overall pick in a draft that, again, we're not draft experts, but we just called it a not top heavy, not star-studded draft.
Right.
So they might get a good player, but they are definitely not getting that. Most likely, I should say, not getting a Khalil Mack with the 24th overall pick. Ideally, next year, the pick will be somewhere between 24 and 32. So they're almost definitely not getting a Khalil Mack in that pick. And realistically, if they suck again next year, they could have basically only traded up about, 10, 20 picks because the Bears have their second-round pick. So I just don't understand the love for the move. Don't get me wrong. I thought, that's what I thought the Raiders would get. And so I was more than happy for the Bears to pay that up, though, because of the talent they were getting. So I do see it maybe as like a win-win, but I don't think it would make more sense to give the transaction of the year award to the Bears for adding an all-pro player for just draft picks.
In his prime, like an all-pro player, one of the best players, the best player the Raiders have drafted in 20 years, an all-pro player that shifts an entire unit by himself. It's not like they just traded, some like scrub tight end or something. They traded an all-pro player simply because they didn't want to pay him. Like that's let's get that out of the way. Like they didn't trade a nobody. They didn't trade some anonymous guy. They traded the best player they've had in the 21st century. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's just insane. And then to say, draft picks are very valuable. Well, I guess I actually have thought about this in the past. Even when teams talk about we've mentioned, like talking about trading Jordan Howard. Oh, well, the Bears won't get more than like a 6th-round pick, and if they get a 4th-round pick, it'd be a steal. But if you're a team that thinks Jordan Howard is your finishing touch, maybe let's just say, for example, we just talked about the Rams. If last year the Rams traded a 1st-round pick for Brandon Cooks for a wide receiver, that's a little bit of an aggressive move. And they thought Brandon Cooks was kind of a finishing touch for them, or a big addition that could really contribute to their team. Trading a 1st-round pick for a wide receiver is a little bit aggressive. I mean, people kind of slammed the Cowboys for doing it when they traded for Amari Cooper. So it's interesting to me that people value draft picks so highly when you don't know where the pick will be until you actually are at the end of the season. You don't know what player is likely to play themselves into or out of that spot. And you don't know what the actual result of taking said player will be. It's like we've talked about in the past. It's a lottery ticket. It's a crapshoot, and you're trading away a sure thing. What you know what you have. It's just very strange to me.
Yeah, you know me, Adam. I'm not someone that's some dumb meatball. Like I consider the numbers. I watch the tape. I'm not just relying on the eye test. I'm not decrying the advancement. I like to consider everything because more information is never a bad thing. More opportunity to analyze everything in a very deep way is never a bad thing. It's a very good thing. But I think often with analytics and the kind of thing that, hey, where they try to go unconventional, which is also a good thing, it's also to this point of just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. The point of analytics and the point of why it's been so embedded in sports really over the past decade plus is, I mean, it's supposed to help teams win. The first goal is to help teams win. The first goal, some of the most successful teams like the Patriots, the Eagles, they use analytics to help themselves win, right? And at a certain point, when you're just going you're just going after draft picks for the sake of draft picks, you're trading away your best assets, you're trading away legitimate talents that will help you win. Like, we're going backwards in this conversation and discussion. We're not the use of what analytics is supposed to be. Like, you said convoluted was a bad word earlier. No, convoluted is perfect. It's become entirely convoluted. It's just trying, hey, they're thinking ahead, like the meme of the black guy. You know what I'm talking about? Pointing at his forehead. Like, that's literally what analytics has become. Like,
right.
And that makes no sense to me. I mean, that makes so little sense to me.
I think, like, one of the big problems, and I don't want to say problem, I guess, but maybe I should just kind of walk that back. But, like, when you look at, like, the movie Moneyball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that story, like those Oakland A's team, how they kind of stripped it down and they went against the quote unquote conventional wisdom, and they found a kind of different way to win baseball games. And now, obviously, within baseball, analytics is not really even analytics anymore, because it's what you use to evaluate everybody at this point. So it was accepted, but that made a lot more sense. Just the idea of, like, within baseball, I don't know if you're a big baseball guy, but the idea of, hey, how often a guy gets on base, his on-base percentage, is a lot more important than how often he does that by getting a hit. And how many bases he touches every time he gets a hit, which is slugging percentage, is a lot more important than knowing how often he gets a hit. So batting average became less of an important statistic, and people started looking at stats like on-base percentage, slugging percentage, and then OPS, which is on-base plus slugging. And then it kind of became OPS plus, which is basically you're above and beyond the average, and all that stuff made sense. It was easy for people to understand. But when analytics becomes unconventional for the sake of being unconventional, that is a negative. If it's unconventional but makes sense, and then it can be, like, I guess what I'm getting at is it should be unconventional for the purpose of becoming conventional, not unconventional for the purpose of being unconventional. And to me, I think that's kind of what this is it goes in this, naming this trade the transaction of the year flies in the face of convention, because like we said, trading away an all-pro talent to acquire draft picks, which you don't know what they will be, and you don't know what the result will be, is incredibly, to me, I get, like, for the Raiders it was long-sighted, but to me it's a short-sighted kind of move, because you don't know what you're getting as opposed to knowing what you have.
Right. And I think often, like, we're almost rewarding, or not, a royal we, teams trying to lose. Like, analytics, one of the big things in recent years was the 76ers tanking to get Joel Embiid and to get Ben Simmons. But they sucked for 5 or 6 years. Why is that something, like, to get all those picks to legitimately put themselves in positions for franchise changing players? They sucked for 5 or 6 years. Why are we rewarding that? Why are we rewarding a team not actively not trying to win? Like, a rebuild shouldn't have to take that long. I mean, I know the NBA is different, but 2 to 3 years and let's go. Let's start from the ground up and let's go. Like, that's losing for this, losing in the long term. Like, it flies in the face of what everything's supposed to be.
and it depends on the sport too, because like a sport like baseball, like I'm a White Sox fan, and we've been
rebuilding for 10 years.
I'm a long-suffering White Sox fan, and they honestly they haven't been rebuilding for 10 years because they tried to rebuild in like 2012, and then they like kind of short called it, and then started trying to go for it in 2015 and 2016, and then in 2016 they had a hot start to their season, but ultimately floundered out as the White Sox are prone to do, and then they decided to fully tear it down. Now we're basically, we went through 17, 18, now we're into 19. We're in year 3 now of a rebuild that still seems like we're going to be at least through one more tough year before they actually do anything. And of course, they kind of bungled their whole free agency situation. But in baseball, it makes sense to have, I guess, I wouldn't even say long-term, but it makes sense that a rebuild takes several years, 3 to 4 to even 5 years. Look at what the Cubs did. It took them a while to acquire all that talent that eventually won them a World Series. But in football, you can't tank. You don't have a farm system. You don't have multiple ways of acquiring talent. Baseball has international free agency. It has, the draft. Even hockey has international free agency, the draft, free agency. Like there's all kinds of different ways to bring players in, and there's farm systems and player development. The NFL is get up and go every week, every year. There's no it's not a developmental league. Either you play or you don't. You can develop a bit. You can improve. But you kind of know from Jump Street whether or not a player fits, whether or not a team is good. And it's hard to just flip the switch like that. And you can't really take a long-term approach in the NFL. And so getting two draft picks in 2 separate years, that again, you don't know what you're going to get out of them as opposed to having an all-pro talent at one of the most important positions in the sport is, to me, again, I think that the Raiders did well, but I still think that they lost the trade just inherently of losing that kind of talent.
I mean, absolutely. And then to touch on Morey's, because he's someone that kind of built the Rockets in the same way. He's the general manager of the Rockets. We don't care about what people say. Well, I guess there should be some input there, and there should be a little bit more of looking inward and how everything is evaluated, because if you're overthinking it to that point, then you're only harming what your organization is capable of, or what they'll be able to accomplish.
Well, even worse too is just saying getting first-round picks can be the right thing, even if the picks aren't well executed.
That makes no sense. That's a direct contradiction. So trade an all-pro player, get first-round picks, and they turn out to be busts. How is that? How that makes no sense.
Right. Just because you're getting first-round picks, I'm a proponent of evaluating a trade on its laurels, of evaluating a move on its laurels in the immediacy, right? Obviously, in the immediacy, the Bears got an all-pro player. The Raiders got future assets. Mm-hmm. So in the immediacy, the Bears obviously win that deal. But you also have the kind of the long-term win and lose. If the Raiders, you have the hindsight 2020 kind of long-term thing. If the Raiders draft busts with those picks, that makes this move all the worse. It doesn't make it you don't retcon it and go, well, they still got first-round picks. No, they got first-round picks that turn into shitty players. Now, mm-hmm. if they get 2 all-pro players that are Hall of Famers, then you retcon it and say, wow, what a hell of a trade they made. They made the most out of that. But if, again, the trade itself, you have to evaluate the trade itself, which I understand is what they're doing here. But the first-round picks not being executed well, negating the fact of acquiring the picks, that doesn't make any sense, because if you don't use those picks well, what was the point of getting them?
I mean, absolutely, and this is a royal statement to all analytics members. Shout out to Brad. Look inward, guys. Let's not be contrarian for the sake of contrarian. I'm not going to pretend to be an MIT level mind, but I can put 2 and 2 together, and you can put 2 and 2 together, Adam, too, as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of our MIT level minds, let's talk about the ultimate test of human intelligence, Rob. Mm-hmm. Who do you got winning your NCAA bracket? Please don't say Duke. Please don't say Duke. Please don't say Duke. Please don't say Duke.
Well, I meticulously slaved over picking my bracket because I'm someone that watches a lot of college basketball throughout the season. 2 or 3 games and never all in one setting, and never and most of the time only like highlights I see on Twitter. So I consider myself an expert, and I consider myself an analyst, and I consider myself I needed to take the 5 minutes I took to fill out my bracket and rapid fire very, very seriously. It's very important, and like you said, it's the test of human intelligence. Like
Please don't say Duke. Just please don't say Duke.
It's the test of human intelligence, to be able to ride with my special boy, my future NBA son, Zion Williamson,
my God,
and Duke winning the national championship.
Oh my God.
Look, it's the safe bet, like of riding with the favorite, riding with the generational NBA prospect that's going to dunk the life out of some dumb 16 seed on Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure when Duke starts off their first round play. Like, Duke all the way, baby. And I almost hate myself for saying that, but Zion's making me root for them because he's just so special.
You want to know what's kind of funny?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
My mom actually went to graduate school at Duke.
Okay.
So she loves Duke. I just have never liked them ever.
I mean, most people don't.
But I have a reason to. I could legitimately like Duke and have a really good reason for it. Like, my mom went to Duke. You know what I mean? Like, she has the degree to prove it. I just hate them so much. Always have. Weirdly,
you're a Kentucky fan, right? So of course.
As I say, this might sound contradictory. I am a Kentucky fan, which I have family that lives in Kentucky as well, which is actually how I became a Kentucky fan. Legitimately, growing up, was a Kentucky basketball fan, not realizing I shouldn't even say fan because I was like 6 years old, but supported Kentucky basketball growing up. Not realizing that they were like one of the all-time greatest programs, and then kind of, I guess, fell ass backwards into having good teams mostly year in and year out with Kentucky. But yeah, I hate Duke so much. And yeah, so you have Duke winning the national. Who's your Final Four?
Duke, Texas Tech, Purdue, and Kentucky.
Wow, bold. Okay, and then who do you have Duke beating in the national championship game?
Kentucky.
See, it's fair. It's fair. My Final Four.
The level of contempt in your voice.
It's fair. It's fair. My Final Four is Duke, Michigan, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And I actually have Kentucky beating Duke. Now, obviously, I picked with my heart a little bit because I am a Kentucky fan. I might actually have to make a second bracket where I think a little bit less, but I think Kentucky is the best team in their region. I think that they're a better team than North Carolina, and I think that they're more deserving of a 1 seed. I think that all 3 of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Michigan State were more deserving of 1 seeds than North Carolina was. And they're not even the bottom 1 seed, which just blows my mind. They're the 3 overall seed. I think Gonzaga should have got that. Regardless, I think Kentucky's better than North Carolina. I think Kentucky will kind of get off the schneid against Tennessee, and then I think obviously Duke shit-birded Kentucky in the first game of the season in the Champions Classic on ESPN television for the whole world to see. But I think that Kentucky has improved a lot as the season has gone on, and I think that one of the reasons I think Kentucky can beat Duke is that they're going to make – like, Duke does not shoot the ball well. They're like one of the worst three-point shooting teams to be this good in college basketball history, and I think Kentucky will spread them out a little bit and not let them run the paint as much, won't let Zion and RJ Barrett kind of have their way with getting to the basket, so I do think Kentucky can win.
Well, I mean, Duke is primarily relying on Zion, right? I mean, if Zion doesn't play well, they're probably not going to go far, but I anticipate Zion just running rampant through the next 2 or 3 weeks. Like that's
Zion can absolutely Zion is I'm not trying to discredit Zion in any way, shape, or form. He's a transcendent talent, but at the end of the day, like, you have to win 6 games over 3 weekends. And when, like, if Duke becomes over reliant on Zion, which I'm not saying that will happen, but if teams basically are able to spread them out and prevent Zion and RJ Barrett from getting to the hoop, which is primarily what those two have to do to score, because and no one else on the team is really a tremendous 3-point shooter. Their best 3-point shooter is probably Cam Reddish, and he's not great. So if you can spread that team out, you can negate the impact that Zion's just overall transcendence has on the game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree. I'm not. Look, Adam, I'm not a college basketball expert. I'm a mind of impeccable intelligence.
Oh, I'm definitely not an expert either. I pay just enough attention to have opinions like that.
Okay, the only opinion I know is, why does everyone shit on Gonzaga and Virginia so much?
Well, Gonzaga is mostly because they're consistently a good team, but they're not in a phenomenal conference, and they've never made a Final Four.
So then why did they get a #1 seed?
Well, they absolutely are one of the best teams in college basketball. It's just that they don't play in a great conference, and I mean, like their overall like history is not like something that really gets taken into consideration when they get seeded. But yeah, I mean, like everyone kind of just hates on them because they're the team that always is kind of the one seed, and like they always just kind of seem like the team that they get all that love, but they just never actually follow through. And I think part of it is the fact that they never they play in the West Coast Conference. Like they don't really play in like a top level, conference.
They don't
They're not
play
even
in the SEC or ACC, right?
I would like the West Coast Conference. I would think almost barely counts as a mid-major. You know what I mean? Like they're definitely not in a Power 6. And it's like I said, I don't even know who some of their like best, like some of the teams in their conference are. Like the biggest school that isn't Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference is BYU. BYU.
Isn't BYU in the Pac-12? I'm just speaking.
No. In basketball, they're definitely in the West Coast Conference.
Huh. Okay.
But then you have like University of Portland, Pacific University, Pepperdine, San Diego, LMU, whatever that is, Santa Clara, San Francisco, St. Mary's. Like it's not a loaded team. I literally Googled this, by the way. I'm like on Google right now. I didn't know that off the top of my head. But yeah, like that's one of the reasons why everyone shits on Gonzaga. And then everyone shits on Virginia because I was listening to a podcast this week with John Rothstein, who is This is March guy on Twitter.
March.
Right. Absolutely. And he kind of had like a name for each bracket or each region. And he called the region with Virginia the region of grind. And that's like the perfect way to describe Virginia basketball. Is they play grindy, gritty basketball. They play defense first. They don't score a lot. Like a Virginia basketball game is kind of like first to 55 wins. And then of course there's the ultimate embarrassment of being the first and only 1 seed to ever lose to a 16 seed. And not only did they lose to UMBC last year, they got blown out by 20 points. So it was just, I think that kind of made them a popular target to get shit on.
It's just fascinating to me. And Gonzaga too, like I saw with Ricky O'Donnell, who I respect his college basketball fans very much. I saw him picking them to get to the Final Four, and I saw him saying that they're like technically, he called them the best college basketball team. When Zion isn't on for Duke, he called Gonzaga the best team in the country. And I'm like, why does everyone hate on them so much? As a non-college basketball all-knower, as someone that is not an all-knower of college basketball, it's just weird.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because like I said, they are so good. And so that's what, like, even what I mentioned, like, I kind of wonder if playing in the conference, like, it obviously doesn't play against them reputation-wise, but I think maybe playing in a bad conference like that hurts them when it comes to the big moments because they don't have to play big moment teams ultimately.
I'm not going to buy again. I don't have the most knowledge, but I'm not going to buy into your thing that the SEC probably should have got a #1 seed. The ACC is always fantastic, dude. I don't think there's. Are you implying an ACC bias? I mean, it's the best conference.
Wow. You mean to tell me that there might be a bias in national sports for teams that play on the East Coast? I've never heard of such a thing.
Doesn't the SEC tennis? Okay, wait, no, never mind. I was about to.
Tennessee's like in the South.
Never mind.
Kentucky's in the South. They're on top of each other.
But they're basically like powerhouse factories, like the SEC.
Tennessee is not a powerhouse factory. Tennessee being this.
It's an SEC school.
I don't say this in a bad thing at all. Tennessee might never be this good at basketball ever again, and they're a very good team.
I mean, but they're still an SEC school, so they still print money. Like they're still a very big Division I school. They still print money.
I mean, SEC isn't a basketball conference. Don't get me wrong. The ACC is more of a basketball conference, but like I don't know. It was a really weird thing, with those 3 ACC teams because like between Virginia, Duke, and North Carolina, like those 3 teams, obviously they each would have played each other twice. Duke beat Virginia both times. Virginia beat North Carolina both times, and North Carolina beat Duke both times, albeit without Zion Williamson. So there was no easy way to call which team was really better because the head-to-heads were what's what I'm looking for, like a round robin, basically. You know what I mean? Like it was like they're a dog chasing each other's tails. It just kept going around. So there's no easy tiebreaker there. Duke with Zion obviously is a 1 seed. Virginia was probably overall had the best regular season of any college basketball team, and then Gonzaga is there too. But I just think North Carolina losing in their conference semifinals, which I understand Kentucky did as well. But overall, like their overall season as well, I just don't think was as impressive as the one that Kentucky put together. And then Tennessee being in their conference final in the SEC on Sunday, I think that should have earned them the 1 seed over North Carolina, even after losing that game.
Hold on, because I'm looking I'm looking. Are you sure this has nothing to do with your own Kentucky bias?
No, I mean, I don't even honestly. If Kentucky had been a 1 seed, I would have been extremely surprised. I did say I think they were more worthy than North Carolina, but I think the 1 seed should have gone to either Tennessee or Michigan State.
Yeah, that's probably.
If Kentucky had beaten Tennessee, basically, if Kentucky, but the way I viewed it was that the winner of Kentucky and Tennessee and the winner of Duke and North Carolina on that Saturday matchup, or I guess, no, it was Duke and North Carolina played on Friday. And then I thought that the winner of that would get a 1 seed. And then Kentucky and Tennessee played on Saturday in the SEC semifinal. And I thought the winner of that would get a 1 seed, regardless of their outcome, because they were playing Auburn, who had no chance at a 1 seed. So I thought that North Carolina not making a conference championship game, but one of those teams doing so would ultimately push them over the end. And at the end, it didn't. And I disagree with that. I don't think North Carolina is better than that.
Tennessee screwed it up when they got blown up by Auburn. They probably would have. Actually.
Yeah, but there's a long-standing theory that the Sunday conference championship games don't matter. Like really? The winner, yeah. Like there's a theory that, I mean, because think about it. Just think about the timeline basically of. Like Tennessee lost that game. The game ended at like 4:30 in the afternoon, and the bracket came out at 6 o'clock, and it had to be prepared and given to CBS for full production before 6 o'clock. Now I have full faith in TV production crews to be able to do things quickly, and they did have plenty of TV timeouts. But there's like I wouldn't almost call it a conspiracy theory, but some people think that ultimately the brackets are prepared before those Sunday results happen. And so even if Tennessee had won, then they would have, or even if Tennessee had won, they still might have been a 2 seed. And here's the other question too. Tennessee obviously lost by a bunch, but what if they had been up by 1 and then lost on a buzzer beater? You know what I mean? Like, does losing the game matter that much? They still made the championship game. And then Michigan State won the Big Ten and beat Michigan, who was the 1 seed for half the season. Like, to me, that was the real the real, kind of indicator that Sunday matchups didn't matter, because Michigan State got robbed. They literally won a dramatic Big Ten championship game, hours before the bracket come out, and they're a 2 seed in Duke's region.
You mean to tell me the NCAA did something lazily and haphazardly? Adam, I'm shocked. I'm shocked, and you've made me woke as
it's like
the
I
NCAA
said,
being.
It's like I said when Lori Loughlin got that whole Lori Loughlin thing was happening. You mean to tell me that there is corruption in college? I've never heard of it.
Wealthy people pay their way into schools? What?
Never heard of it. Next, you're going to tell me that college basketball players are being exploited for labor.
Oh man, that NCAA video.
Or college athletes.
That NCAA video with the student athlete, how often it's been getting dunked on Twitter, gives me life, dude. Like, not to make such a big sidebar out of this, but like, even as a D3 scrub, I was a D3 scrub. Like, that video isn't accurate. Like, you're getting up at 4 a.m., you're working out, you have classes, and then you have like an afternoon workout or like some kind of practice. Like, no. Like, that wasn't even accurate for the lower levels of college athletics.
Yeah, I was not a college athlete. My brother went to a D3 school as a volleyball player, and it was an introductory program. Like, the first year they had a program, and he had to be up at 5:30 for workouts, go to class, he had to walk all the way across campus to class, and then after his class had to go all the way back to the gym for workouts again in the afternoon. And he'd be regularly late to those workouts because he had to walk all the way across campus, and his coach would then run him. And it was like, just sounded like the most miserable shit ever. And so he just stopped. I was like, yeah, like, you're not going to go pro. What's the freaking point? He wasn't getting money for it, unless you're getting money, like if you're getting scholarships.
I know. My point overall is just like how they try to put that out as like their own little propaganda, and like it's not.
Oh, no. I guess
it's not even remotely. Oh, okay. I mean, it's like,
yeah.
It's not even remotely true for even the non-big time people.
Right, and then imagine like being I know it, like, North Carolina got in trouble with their basketball players, but like, imagine being like a football player at Alabama or a basketball player at Duke, or like, I know people, like, obviously there's like they have to go to class or whatever, but like when you're at Alabama, football's your full-time job. You know what I mean? like
you're not there for an education, right? Like Quentin Williams was not like paying attention, like. He's there to be an NFL player. Like, he's he's not. He's going to be a top 5 pick. Like, he's not there to attend classes and stuff. He's there to like get mentorship from Nick Saban and go get like a $50 million contract in the NFL. Like, that's just the reality.
And North Carolina got in trouble. North Carolina was literally making up classes for basketball players. They got busted for that.
What, like religion and Star Wars or something?
No, like, it was like they would. Like, it wasn't even like making up classes for players. Like, oh, like, here's an easy class. It was like, it would be like, hey, let's say Adam Hess plays for North Carolina basketball. Adam Hess got an A in, I don't know, like you said, religion and Star Wars. We can call it religion. Adam Hess got an A in religion and Star Wars, but there was no classroom assigned to religion and Star Wars. There was no teacher assigned to religion and Star Wars. There was no syllabus for religion and Star Wars. They could not, like, they basically just made it up, like, out of thin air. It just was like, oh, it's on his transcript.
So shocked the NCAA is corrupt.
Right.
So shocked big time teams basically just make college sports a job. I'm shocked. I have I'd have more to add to this, but the NCAA only exploited me to the smallest degree, but still.
But you were still exploited, Rob.
I was exploited. I mean, I was a second or third string tight end. I had good size and good hands. Had really minimal speed. But like, what was like you were saying with what was your brother playing volleyball, right?
Yeah.
Like,
mm-hmm.
What was the point in me getting up at 4 a.m. as a person, as a non-starter? What was the point in me like going out there? Maybe I wasn't fully involved in the team mantra, but like, it was clearly the NCAA hive mind getting into my head. That was clearly what it was.
Absolutely. Thoughts and prayers to Rob's exploitation. T's and P's.
Thank you, Adam. I'm very happy. I'm very happy you said that.
All right, Rob. I'm still mad at you for picking Duke, but
over Kentucky too. Let's not gloss over that. Over your favorite team.
Hey, at least if that proves to be the national championship game, we will both be. We call this the ultimate test of human intelligence. So if we both predict the championship game right, that basically makes us the smartest people on earth.
I know, but you're going to be miserable if my prediction comes true, where Duke wins. Like, you're going to hate yourself, and I look forward to like a short Twitter rant. Like, so let's.
There'll be no Twitter rant. I'll probably just break my phone.
You're going to punt your phone?
Well, the only thing that can make it worse, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, and I might piss people off reading this, the only thing that can make it worse would be the Bulls getting Zion Williamson, because I have such disdain for the Chicago Bulls organization that it would be so wrong to Zion to strap him to this team. To that team, I should say.
I've said my inflammatory comments about the Bulls and Zion, so I'll just say I agree and add nothing to that.
Hell yeah. And also, as a White Sox fan, I'm just going to say this. Screw Jerry Reinsdorf. That's all I have to say about that. Rob, what's your parting shot?
Okay, you're not going to anchor anyone with that. I think most people would agree with that.
Right. Amen, brother man.
That's my parting shot. Amen, brother man.
Amen, brother man. All right. Well, follow Robert on Twitter at Robert Zielinski. That's Z-E-G Linsky with an I. Follow me on Twitter at _Adam Hess. That's H-E-S-S like Sam, not F like fam. Rob, do you have anything else to say?
Follow us on Twitter at the Blitznet.
I was getting there.
Okay, Adam, amen.
Patreon.com/Blitz Network, not the Blitz Network, just Blitz Network. Patreon.com/Blitz Network.
Amen, brother man. That's my parting shot.
Amen, brother man.